So apparently toward the end of 2023, the idea that bananas are a big smoothie no-no went viral. But if we keep reading, there's an interesting detail that I think turns out to be pretty important. These smoothies were allowed to sit around for some period of time, up to an hour. I can easily see how somebody just looking at this would conclude the polyphenol oxidase in the bananas likely led to this pretty dramatic decline in epicatechin molecules that were seen in plasma after drinking the smoothie. What they did not show is that... My name is Matt Kaeberlein, and welcome to the Optispan YouTube channel. Hey everyone, welcome to the Optispan podcast. On today's episode, we're going to try to debunk what appears to be a pervasive internet myth around why you shouldn't add bananas to your smoothies. So this turns out to be, I think, a really good bite-sized example of how bad information can get widely propagated through social networks and why you really need to be very careful about who you get your health and science information from online. So apparently toward the end of 2023, the idea that bananas are a big smoothie no-no went viral based on a TikTok video from somebody who goes by the handle Distilled Science. And I don't know anything about Distilled Science. I'm not a TikToker, but apparently this person has amassed more than 500,000 followers by putting on a lab coat and giving scientific advice in bite-sized videos. And unfortunately, at least in this case, that advice is incorrect. So what appears to have happened is that Distilled Science saw a study published in the scientific journal Food and Function. And according to his video, he just loves fruit smoothies with bananas and berries and yogurt and protein powder. And this paper was concerning to him because it suggested that having bananas in your smoothie destroys the good polyphenols that come from other fruits and vegetables. And I'll do a deep dive into the study and what they actually did. But for those of you who like TikTok-sized content, I'll just give you the punchline. So this all comes from a paper that was entitled Impact of Polyphenol Oxidase on the Bioavailability of Flavin-3 Alls in Fruit Smoothies, a controlled, single-blinded crossover study. And what this paper actually showed was that if you grind up a banana in your smoothie, mix it with a certain type of polyphenol along with other fruits and vegetables, and let it sit at room temperature for an hour, which I doubt anyone would actually do, that will likely result in at least one type of polyphenol being converted into something else, which may or may not have any impact on the health properties of the smoothie itself. What they did not show is that polyphenols in general are destroyed or that the nutritional or health properties of the smoothie are changed in any appreciable way. In fact, from the data in the paper and just a little bit of knowledge about the effect of temperature on enzyme kinetics, the most likely interpretation is that as long as you drink your smoothie cold and within the first 10 minutes, there won't be much change at all in the polyphenol content. So having said all that, I don't think it's a great idea to add bananas to your smoothie anyway. Personally, I love the taste of bananas, especially frozen, but I rarely eat them. And I rarely eat them because bananas are essentially Snickers bars masquerading as fruit. I wouldn't put them in my smoothie because they're not a particularly healthy food, and they can definitely be unhealthy for many people, especially those who have a metabolic imbalance or prediabetes. So more generally, if you are a smoothie person, I'd say you really ought to carefully examine how many calories, and in particular, the amount of simple sugars there are in your favorite smoothie recipe, and just make sure you aren't shooting yourself in the nutritional foot, so to speak. Probably most importantly, this whole thing has led some people to believe that they shouldn't eat healthy fruits like avocados and blueberries because those fruits are also high in this enzyme, polyphenol oxidase, that bananas are high in. And that's just nonsense. Please, please don't let this type of bad science communication keep you from eating healthy, wholesome foods. Both avocados and blueberries are fantastic food choices. And then finally, please keep in mind that any random person can buy a lab coat from Surplus, record a 60-second video about science. That doesn't make them credible, and it doesn't make them a scientist. Okay, let's see what the study actually shows. And again, title of the paper is Impact of Polyphenol Oxidase on the Bioavailability of Flavin-3 Alls in Fruit Smoothies, a controlled, single-blinded crossover study. And it was published in the journal Food and Function, which is a journal of the Royal Society of Chemistry. Okay, so there are essentially 4 claims from the video that we need to evaluate. Claim number 1. Fruits and vegetables are high in polyphenol compounds, and those compounds are good for you. So that's mostly true. It is definitely true that many fruits and vegetables are high in polyphenols, and there is evidence that a diet high in polyphenols is associated with health benefits, or at least better health outcomes. But the extent to which these benefits come directly from the polyphenols, in my opinion, is likely massively overstated. It turns out that diets high in polyphenols are also high in fruits and vegetables. And the health benefits mostly come from the fact that you are eating a nutritious, high-fiber diet and not eating Big Macs all day. So I'm very doubtful that polyphenols in the diet themselves are a big driver of the health benefits associated with the diet high in fruits and vegetables. Okay. Claim number 2, bananas are high in an enzyme called polyphenol oxidase that destroys polyphenols. Again, that's kind of half true. So bananas are absolutely high in polyphenol oxidase compared to other fruits and vegetables, and we'll show some of that data in a couple of minutes. It's also true that if allowed to act for long enough, the polyphenol oxidase will convert at least some classes of polyphenols into quinones or other types of bioactive molecules. Polyphenol oxidase doesn't really destroy polyphenols so much as convert them into other bioactive molecules. And again, whether this is good or bad from a health benefits perspective is unclear. There's really no evidence here that it's a negative in terms of the health properties of your smoothie. There's nothing in the paper to suggest that. Okay. Claim number 3. The study showed that grinding up bananas in your smoothie gets rid of the polyphenols. This is incorrect. So what the study actually showed is that if you leave a blended banana in your smoothie at room temperature for an hour, it will likely convert at least one class of polyphenols into something else. And they didn't measure what else. So that's really what the paper showed. And then number 4, therefore, you should not put bananas in your smoothie. That may be the correct conclusion, although for the wrong reason. Again, no evidence here that polyphenol oxidase dependent oxidation of polyphenols from ground up bananas reduces any potential benefits from other fruits and vegetables in your smoothie. Whether you should put bananas in your smoothie in the first place because bananas are high in simple sugars and will in fact cause a massive glucose spike in many people, that's maybe a better reason not to put bananas in your smoothie. Okay, so now let's dive into the paper. So the first thing to understand here is there is an enzyme called polyphenol oxidase that in the presence of oxygen can oxidize certain polyphenols. And really to be precise, polyphenol oxidase is a class of enzymes. There are multiple different proteins that can carry out this kind of a chemical reaction of basically oxidizing polyphenols in the presence of high oxygen. Okay. This chemical reaction is one of the reasons why some fruits and vegetables turn brown when they sit around for long enough. But it's a sort of a long-term reaction. So there are multiple steps here that lead to the brown pigment, including at the end a condensation step, which is not necessarily dependent even on polyphenol oxidase. And it's probably that condensation step that leads to the loss of the biological activities. If there are, in fact, biological activities from the polyphenols that are important for the health benefits, it's probably that condensation step that leads to the loss of that activity. But even that's a little bit speculative. Okay. Second thing to understand is again, polyphenol oxidase doesn't really destroy polyphenols. It modifies them into other classes of bioactive molecules, generally quinones, although probably there are some other classes as well. And again, the idea that those molecules are less beneficial from a health perspective is plausible. I think there's some evidence to support it, but really hasn't been well established, and certainly nothing in this study would indicate or demonstrate any loss of health benefits from this reaction. Okay, so now let's get into the paper. And before we do, it's useful just to appreciate whether or not the authors have any conflicts of interest. So it turns out that several of the authors on this paper are employed by Mars Incorporated. Obviously, Mars has all sorts of interests in the food industry. I don't know that this means that there's anything that we need to really think about in terms of, the impact or the motivation of the authors to get a certain result, but it is interesting to note that several of them are employed by Mars. So the place I always like to start with the paper, we start with the title and then the abstract. So again, the title of the paper is Impact of Polyphenol Oxidase on the Bioavailability of Flavin-3-Alls in Fruit Smoothies, a controlled, single-blinded crossover study. And the first line of the abstract is Flavin-3-Alls are bioactive compounds found in a variety of fruits and vegetables that have been linked to positive health benefits. So I already talked about this correlative association between polyphenols. Flavin-3-alls are a subset of polyphenols and health benefits. The extent to which they are driving the health benefits of a diet rich in fruits and vegetables is unclear. My personal opinion is it's a minor part of the health benefits of such a diet. Okay, so flavin-3-alls are actually a subgroup even of flavonoids, which is a subgroup of polyphenols, and they include a diverse set of compounds, including catechin, epicatechin gallate, epigallocatechin, epigallocatechin gallate, proanthocyanidins, and theaflavins. And you may have heard these terms in various contexts previously. So those are all flavin-3-alls. Again, just keep in mind here, there are many different types of flavin-3-alls. This study only looked at a very specific subset they refer to as structurally related epicatechin molecules, or SREMs, in the study. So when we talk about what they actually measured, it's not even all flavin-3-alls, it's just a very specific subset of flavin-3-alls, which are a very specific subset of polyphenols. And in fact, there are many more polyphenols out there we should be thinking about that this study didn't even consider. Phenolic acids, flavonoids, stilbenes, lignans. So the study really is pretty limited in what they measured. Okay, so back to the abstract. The next line is, increasing habitual flavin-3-all intake is challenged by the generally low consumption of fruits and vegetables. So this is sort of an interesting sentence. I think what they're trying to say is, it would be good from a health perspective if people ate more flavin-3-alls, but that's hard because people generally don't want to eat fruits and vegetables, which is sort of a funny way to approach the context of this study. It makes the assumption, first of all, that the benefits are coming from the flavin-3-alls as opposed to the fruits and vegetables, which is wrong, by the way. And I'm not saying that polyphenols don't have health benefits, but again, the benefits of a diet high in fruits and vegetables has far less to do with the polyphenols and far more to do with the overall quality of the food. Lots of fiber, complex carbs, vitamins and minerals, and the fact that you aren't eating garbage, processed, or fast foods if you're eating a lot of healthy fruits and vegetables. So my personal guess is that even if we took 90% of the polyphenols out of these foods, you would still get 90+% of the benefits of those foods compared to a standard American diet. Okay, so again, this is sort of written with the implication that we should try to get people to eat more flavin-3-alls, but it's hard because people don't want to eat fruits and vegetables. And I don't know. I just don't really see the point of that. Okay, so the next line is, while smoothies are a commonly endorsed consumer-accepted means to increase the daily intake of these important foods, fruits used for smoothie preparation can have a high polyphenol oxidase activity and thus potentially affect the content and bioavailability of flavin-3-alls. So as already discussed, polyphenol oxidase, enzyme that can chemically modify flavin-3-alls and other polyphenols. This is a true statement. Some fruits have higher levels of polyphenol oxidase than other fruits. These are the fruits that tend to brown quickly. And so, yeah, the level of polyphenol oxidase in your smoothie could, in principle, impact the amount of flavin-3-alls in your smoothie if polyphenol oxidase is converting some of the flavin-3-all molecules into other bioactive molecules like quinones. Okay, that makes sense? Hopefully. Now on to the rationale of the study. What they wanted to do. So to assess whether or not consuming freshly prepared smoothies made with different polyphenol oxidase containing fruit impacts the bioavailability of the flavin-3-alls. A controlled, single-blinded, and crossover study was conducted in healthy men, N of 8, who consumed a flavin-3-all containing banana-based smoothie. That's a high polyphenol oxidase drink. A flavin-3-all containing mixed berry smoothie, a low polyphenol oxidase drink, or a flavin-3-all in capsule format. That's their control. And we'll look at the data in a minute. So basically what they did was they ground up a banana, combined it with a known amount of flavin-3-all, and then had people drink it. That was the banana group. They did the same thing, but instead of a banana, put other berries in there. And then they had a positive control, which was just a capsule full of flavin-3-alls. Okay. Results: the peak plasma concentration of flavin-3-all metabolites after capsule intake. So plasma, they're just measuring it from blood plasma. The peak plasma concentration was 680 plus or minus 78 nanomoles per liter, which was similar to the levels detected after the intake of the low polyphenol oxidase drink, the berries. Okay. In contrast, the intake of the high polyphenol oxidase drink, the banana smoothie, resulted in a Cmax of 96 plus or minus 47 nanomoles per liter, 84% lower than that obtained after the capsule intake. So here they're claiming that adding the banana to the smoothie reduced the flavin-3-alls in plasma, measured from blood, by 84%. And we'll look at that data in a minute. But that's the claim. And that's where this interpretation, incorrect as it turns out, that adding bananas to your smoothie destroys polyphenols comes from. So let's just chalk that up for now to something we need to evaluate whether it's correct or not when we look at the actual data. Continuing on in the abstract, in a subsequent study, so this is part 2, study 2, N of 11 people, flavin-3-alls were co-ingested with a high polyphenol oxidase banana drink. And what they mean by that is basically they had the people take a drink of the flavin-3-all mix and the banana drink, and then the flavin-3-all mix and the banana drink. So that's the co-ingestion, okay? So they co-ingested these two drinks, but contact prior to intake, meaning they didn't mix them together first, was prevented. In this context, plasma flavin-3-all levels were still reduced, suggesting an effect possibly related to post-ingestion polyphenol oxidase activity degrading flavin-3-alls in the stomach. And we'll also take a look at that data. And again, it's worth just noting they use the word degrading, but polyphenol oxidase doesn't actually degrade flavin-3-alls. It converts them into other bioactive molecules, including quinones. Okay, so they're more oxidized molecules, but not necessarily any less bioactive or beneficial. Again, it's important to keep in mind and ask the question, what did they actually measure here? Okay, so then continuing on in the abstract, there was a substantial range in the polyphenol oxidase activity detected in 18 different fruits, vegetables, and plant-derived dietary products. So this is more or less irrelevant to the main point about banana smoothies, but an interesting aside and worth looking at the data. And this is where some people have gotten the idea they shouldn't eat blueberries or avocados comes from, which is wrong. Okay, so then back to the abstract. In conclusion, bioavailability of flavin-3-alls and most likely other dietary polyphenol bioactives can be reduced substantially by the co-ingestion of high polyphenol oxidase-containing products, the implications of which are of importance for dietary advice and food preparation, both at home and in industrial settings. Okay, so those are their conclusions. And basically what they're saying is that eating foods high in polyphenol oxidase could have an impact on dietary advice and food preparation at home. And then in industrial settings, again, several of the authors come from Mars, probably are in industrial food production backgrounds. Okay, so we'll come back to this at the end. I don't really think anything in this paper shows that we really need to be concerned about how we're preparing our food, but it's worth thinking about. Okay, so let's look at the experiments and what they actually did. So experiment number 1, again, is this study where they had people consume one of 3 drinks. And this is what they call a crossover design, meaning that the same people participated in different groups. They just did that in different orders at different times. Okay, so they had 8 young adult men. All 8 of them took the flavanol capsule. 6 of them drank the smoothie with mixed berries, the low polyphenol oxidase smoothie. 6 of them drank the smoothie with bananas, the high polyphenol oxidase smoothie. Okay. They all were asked to eat a diet low in flavonols before the study. Okay. So they presumably came in with pretty similar baseline levels of flavonols in their plasma. Okay. Again, they only measured a very specific class of epicatechin molecules, these SREMs, or structurally related epicatechin molecules, in plasma at various time points after consumption of these drinks. And again, the crossover design means the same people are participating in the different arms of the study. They're just doing it in a different order at different times. Okay. So let's look at the data first. And this is pretty interesting, right? So if you look at the blood level of these structurally related epicatechin molecules or plasma levels over time after taking either the capsule with milk or the banana smoothie or the mixed berry smoothie, you see the control and the mixed berry smoothie look pretty similar to each other. You get this nice high peak in SREMs measured in plasma, maxes out after about 3 or 4 hours, and then comes down slowly. So one way to think about this is just the area under that curve is an estimate of the total bioavailability of the epicatechin molecules from plasma. Okay, looks pretty similar between those two groups. We look at the banana smoothie. It's a very flat curve, very low, clearly suggesting and indicating that there is much less of these epicatechin molecules in plasma after drinking the banana smoothie. So I can easily see how somebody just looking at this data would conclude that the polyphenol oxidase in the bananas likely led to this pretty dramatic decline in epicatechin molecules that were seen in plasma after drinking the smoothie. Certainly something about the banana smoothie had this effect. So again, looks pretty convincing, tempting to jump to the same conclusion that Distilled Science did, make our TikTok video, go viral, and go on about our day. But let's take a look at the methods and see what they actually did here. So we go to the methods section. The banana smoothie was prepared with 177 grams of ripe frozen bananas and 240 grams of almond milk. Okay, so that's what goes in the banana smoothie. And then they also added this flavin all cocoa mixture to all of the groups. The mixed berry smoothie was prepared with 50 grams each of strawberries, blueberries, blackberries, and raspberries, 120 grams of almond milk, 70 grams of water, 105 grams of crushed ice, 95 grams of yogurt. Okay, so this seems pretty reasonable. I'm not sure exactly why the yogurt was added to one and not the other, but we'll assume that doesn't affect bioavailability in any way. Okay, so this seems pretty reasonable. But if we keep reading, there's an interesting detail that I think turns out to be pretty important. So they say that after preparation, each smoothie type was freshly prepared on 2 independent study days and consumed by volunteers within 1 hour of preparation. Okay, so these smoothies were allowed to sit around for some period of time up to an hour. And I can't think of any reasonable explanation for why you would do the experiment this way. I really can't. And I've done a lot of experiments. I don't think anyone makes their frozen smoothie and lets it sit around at room temperature for an hour before drinking it. So this is at a minimum of questionable relevance in the real world and might be important for the outcomes they're actually measuring in this study. So the way you should have done this experiment is have the person there. There's only 8 people or 6 people, right? It's not like this is a super complicated experimental design. Have the person in the lab make the smoothie, drink it. Right? There's no good reason to let the smoothie sit around for an hour before the person drinks it. Okay. And interestingly, if we look at figure 2 from the study, which shows the rate at which polyphenol oxidase degrades these structurally related epicatechin molecules in a test tube, right? Just sitting in, well, maybe not a test tube, maybe it's in the blender. I don't know. It's not clear what they use, but sitting out at room temperature for an hour, it turns out that it's almost exactly an hour when you get down to about 10% of the polyphenols, or at least these epicatechin related molecules left in that mixture, okay? So if you were to drink this after 10 minutes, it would be a much higher amount of these structurally related epicatechin molecules that are present in the mixture. If you drink it after just a couple of minutes, almost all of them are still going to be there. So if I was suspicious of the author's motives, and you typically should be, it's almost as if they designed the smoothie experiment in order to get the result they wanted. Because after 60 minutes, they're all gone. So it's suspicious. Now, one other thing about this figure that's relevant is they do make a case that it is in fact polyphenol oxidase that is reducing the concentration of the SREMs, the epicatechin molecules, because if they put in known inhibitors of polyphenol oxidase, you see that that's blocked, at least at the half-hour time point. So this makes a case that it is, in fact, the polyphenol oxidase that is doing this chemical reaction that is leading to the loss of the epicatechin molecules from the mixture. Okay. So it's also worth noting that in all of the studies, the flavin-3-ols come from a standardized cocoa extract. This is a flavanol-enriched extraction. That's pretty reasonable, but, not something that most people are going to typically be adding to their smoothies. Maybe some people do. I think it's also worth noting that compared to room temperature, polyphenol oxidase will really only have about 10% of its enzymatic activity at 4 degrees Celsius, which is like a typical refrigerator temperature, and even less if it's frozen. So again, the relevance to how most people are going to be making their smoothies, if you're adding, frozen fruits or frozen bananas, probably most of this degradation activity is going to happen once that mixture has warmed up to room temperature, which is going to probably take 15 or 20 minutes. So again, the way this experiment was done may have biased it towards seeing a loss of these structurally related epicatechin molecules. Okay, so that's experiment number 1. I think the conclusion here is if you let a ground up banana sit in your flavanol extract smoothie at room temperature for an hour before you drink it, you will very likely have little to no detectable epicatechins in your blood. But you might have other interesting bioactive polyphenol oxidase products in your blood. We don't know because they didn't look. Okay, so now experiment number 2. And here, I think they kind of wanted to ask whether any flavanols are lost from the polyphenol oxidase inside of the body. And so this is where they had 11 people take alternating sips from a flavanol drink and a blended up banana drink. And this really gets around my biggest criticism of experiment number 1, which is that leaving the smoothie at room temperature for up to an hour will lead to a loss of the epicatechin molecules in the mixture. Okay, and I would say here, the data look much less convincing that the blended up banana has a large impact on epicatechin molecule bioavailability. So there is a drop, right? If we look at these curves, there is a difference between the group that just had the flavanol drink and the group that in an alternating way took sips from a blended banana drink. But it's not a huge drop. It's statistically significant, but more than half, at least at the early time points, 4/5 of the epicatechin molecules show up in the banana drink group compared to the flavanol only drink group. So maybe a 20 to 30% decrease, but most of the epicatechins are still showing up in plasma when you do this alternating sips sort of model. So I think this is probably closer to what you would see if you did this the way a person would typically drink a banana smoothie, which is blended up, drink it while it's still cold. That's my guess. But again, we don't know because that's not the way they did the experiment. Okay. And then finally, there's a table of polyphenol oxidase activity from various fruits shown in the paper. This was also shown in the video from Distilled Science. I would say this is, pretty much academic interest, but I find it interesting. Bananas are by far the highest on this list, followed by beet greens, apples, pears, beets, peaches, and then avocados. And I think this is where this sort of one negative downside of this video comes from, is that people have interpreted this to mean that they shouldn't eat avocados. Blueberries are like 3 more down on the list, or blueberries, because they have polyphenol oxidase in them. And again, avocados and blueberries are great fruits. And so again, this is probably another reason not to get your science or nutrition advice from random people on TikTok, because you're very likely to be misled. Okay. So here's my summary of what this study did and did not show. What they showed, again, is that if you grind up a banana, mix it with a high flavanol extract in liquid solution, and let it sit for an hour at room temperature, most of these structurally related epicatechin molecules will be converted into something else, probably quinones, by polyphenol oxidase, and they won't show up in your plasma if you then drink that mixture. If you don't let it sit for an hour and instead drink it at the same time that you make it, there might be a modest reduction in epicatechin molecules in plasma, but it's probably not going to be more than 30%. That's my guess. What the study did not show is anything relevant for how a normal person would prepare and consume a smoothie, with or without bananas. Any information on what the structurally related epicatechin molecules are converted into and whether these molecules are present at higher, lower, or equal amounts in the plasma after consuming the drink, I think we can make the assumption they will be present at higher amounts because that's what you're actually then consuming, or any evidence that these product molecules from the PPO reaction have lesser health benefits than the structurally related epicatechin molecules that were measured. And so, as I said at the outset, I personally wouldn't add bananas to my smoothie, but that's mostly because they're full of simple sugars and will cause many people to have very large blood glucose spikes. And there are better fruits that you can add to your smoothie if you're going to consume a smoothie. But I don't think this study really provides any information about whether the polyphenol oxidase in bananas results in a positive, negative, or neutral effect on the total concentration of beneficial bioactive molecules or health properties of your smoothie. And finally, eat avocados. Sorry, that came out. That just sounds dumb. Okay, so I hope you found that interesting, informative. I actually had a lot of fun doing a deep dive into this topic. I, again, had never really thought much about polyphenol oxidase, didn't know much about it. I do think it's interesting to think about how the chemistry of our foods interact with each other. As always, please feel free to leave questions or comments below. If you're not already a subscriber, I'd encourage you to subscribe. And I hope to see you next time on the Optispan podcast.